The Body from the Past, a Jazzi Zanders mystery. Book 5, by Judi Lynn. Narrated by Devon Sorvery. Chapter 1. Jazzi opened one eye to scowl at the alarm clock. She hadn't heard it go off before she felt Ansel's hand patting her fanny. How had she missed her wake-up buzz? The world was still blurry, so she squinted to focus better, and that was when it hit her. It wasn't 6:30 yet. She opened her other eye and turned to glare at her husband. Her tall, blonde Viking grinned, unrepentant. "I thought we could get an early start on our new fixer-upper." She groaned. She'd rather have had another half-hour of sleep. Inky raised his head, looking irritated. Her black cat relied on the alarm, too. Marmalade, their nice cat, walked over Ansel's torso to snuggle between them. Ansel stroked her orange fur. Ansel's beloved pug, George, snored in his dog bed, as usual. With a sigh, Jazzi swung her legs over the side of the bed. "I'm up. I'm moving." Ansel was more excited than usual about this house. So was her cousin Jerod. Jerod had found it in a quaint, small town southwest of River Bluffs, farther than they usually drove for a job, but they got it at such a good price it was worth the extra effort. Merlot was a college town a half-hour from River Bluffs with a population close to 6,000. She and Ansel lived on the north side of town, so their drive would be longer than Jerod's. They'd spent all summer and the start of fall working on a house north of River Bluffs in Auburn, Indiana. That town was quaint and charming, too, and they'd made so much money on their project that they'd all decided it was worth driving if they found a special house, and this one was even better than the last. Jazzi pushed tangled, honey-blonde hair out of her face. It had been damp when she fell asleep last night, and it had dried funny. No matter. She always pulled it into a ponytail for work. Ansel was tugging on worn jeans and a t-shirt when she stumbled past him to the bathroom. She stopped to ask, "You aren't going to fall in love with this place when we fix it, are you? I don't want to move, no matter how awesome it is." It was awesome. It looked like it could have been pulled right out of an English novel with its stone exterior, 3 chimneys, and arched windows. The main structure was 3 stories high, and the wing on the side was 2. The house was big, with lots of charm, large rooms, and as much curb appeal as their own stone cottage. Ansel shook his head. "I love our place. It's plenty big enough for us, and we have enough property for our pond and gazebo. I never want to leave here." Good. She felt the same way, especially since they'd renovated every square inch of it except the basement. And Ansel was already making noises about that. If she wasn't careful, they'd be turning half of it into a playroom like they'd helped Jerod do with his. Mollified, she hurried to get ready, and 10 minutes later, she and Ansel were leading the cats downstairs to the kitchen. George, as usual, was carried by Ansel. The pug didn't like stairs. All 3 pets went straight to their food bowls, and while she fed them, Ansel poured coffee and started the toast. He barely gave her enough time to pack sandwiches and chips in the cooler for their lunch before he loaded everything, including George, into their work van and turned west toward Merlot. The drive took 45 minutes. Jazzi tugged her hoodie shut against the morning chill. Early October days were warm enough, but mornings and evenings were cooler. She glanced at the trees. Too early to see any color yet. In another 2 weeks, the woods would blaze with reds and golds. The thought reminded her of their last Halloween. Not the best time for them. They'd been drawn into solving another murder, and that time, instead of finding her aunt's body in their attic, this one had been propped right on their front stoop. She sighed. She and Ansel had made a pledge. No more bodies. When Ansel pulled into the driveway of the Merlot house, Jerod's pickup was already there. Her cousin was standing in the front yard, staring at their new project. Ansel went to join him, carrying George. Jazzi tugged the cooler out of the back of the van. and, setting it beside the open door, went to join them. "It's a beauty, isn't it?" Jerod asked. "With a new roof, it will look even better." "I've been thinking about that." Jazzi licked her lips. "When you do that, you've thought of something that's going to cost more money." Her cousin raised an eyebrow. "Spill it, cuz, but it had better be good." "You know how much I love English mysteries. Well, I always like the descriptions of English gardens and thatched roofs." "We can't do thatch here," Ansel said, interrupting. "No, but we can do fake shake shingles. They'd give sort of the same effect." Jerod rubbed his chin, studying the facade of the house. "You know, those just might be worth it on this place. It would fit the vibe of the rest of the house." Ansel nodded agreement. "I'll give you a yes vote, too. This house deserves something extra." That had been easier than she expected. Just wait till Ansel shared his ideas for the house with Jerod. There was a small room on the first floor that he was dying to make into a library, and he'd already shown her pictures of how he'd like to do the front foyer and create a small mudroom in the back hallway off the patio. Finished looking, the guys grabbed their gear, and Jazzi got the cooler. Then they headed inside. Jerod called to order the shingles they wanted, and then he pulled on his heavy work gloves. The previous owner had warned them that she'd left some furniture behind. They had to clear it out. For once, the rooms downstairs and up were so large they wouldn't have to knock out walls. The interior of the house was in good shape, except someone had gone crazy with wallpaper upstairs. Every room had some. It all needed to be stripped. The wooden floors could be refinished, except in the kitchen, and they might have to refinish the graceful curved stairs and railings, too. The kitchen and every bathroom needed to be gutted, and the basement's cement was crumbling. No structural problems, just old cement, worn with time. They'd have to add a new layer on the floor and walls, as well as a new furnace and central air. It sounded like a lot, but they usually had more to deal with. This time around, they could focus on making every improvement add to the character of the house. Their first job? Clean out every room so that they could get started. Jazzi carried the cooler into the kitchen and tucked it against the wall where the kitchen table used to sit. For once, they'd decided not to gut the kitchen until later in their project. That way, they'd have a refrigerator and sink for their lunches. Jerod scowled at the pine cupboards and linoleum floor. The woman who owned this place loved to entertain. You'd have thought she'd spend the money to spiff up the kitchen. Ansel shrugged, carrying George's dog bed to a corner of the room. He took the thickly padded oval from project to project. George immediately went to curl in it to supervise. There's a big dining room. She probably only prepped food in here. Jerod had talked to her. They hadn't. She didn't cook. She catered. Well, there's your answer. Jazzi plugged in the coffee urn and turned it on. She never spent time in this room. Sort of like my wife. Jerod constantly fussed about Franny's cooking. I married a wonderful woman, but if I don't cook, it's safer to grab food on the way home. We all have different loves and talents, Jazzi reminded him. I guess. She's a whiz when it comes to furniture restoration. There you go. Jazzi looked out the kitchen window at the patio and backyard. The landscaping looked professional, and one of the added bonuses of this house was that a balcony led off the upstairs hallway, forming a roof for the patio beneath it. 2 more great places to entertain. Ansel followed her gaze. I bet it was hard for the owner to leave this house. Jerod shook his head. Madeline gave lots and lots of parties, and that's how she met her new husband. After he attended one of them, they kept in touch. That's why she sold this place to us for the same price she paid for it originally. Once he popped the question, she wanted to sell it fast and move east to marry him. Jazzi pursed her lips, trying to remember the house's history. She got it at a good price, too, didn't she? Jerod nodded. The same family owned it for years, passed it down through the generations, but the last of the Hodgkills...